Have you noticed your joints don't recover the way they used to? And that getting out of bed in the morning now feels slower, stiffer, almost like your body needs extra time just to fully start working. For many people over 60, this doesn't happen suddenly. It builds quietly over time. A little stiffness in the knees, tightness in the fingers when waking up, or shoulders that don't move as freely as they once did. And at first, it's easy to ignore. But then something strange starts to happen. The discomfort doesn't stay consistent. Some days feel almost normal. And other days, even simple movements feel heavier than they should, sometimes after completely ordinary meals or routine days. That's when many people start asking themselves a difficult question. Is this just a natural part of aging? Or is there something deeper going on that most people never really look into? Because recently, attention has been growing around something interesting. Two very simple vegetables that may support the body's natural ability to regulate inflammation. The same process that is often linked with joint stiffness and discomfort in later life. And that's why some people have started referring to them as a kind of natural daily support for joint health after 60. But what makes this truly surprising is not just the vegetables themselves. It's what they may be influencing inside the body that most people never connect to joint discomfort at all. And if you've ever felt like your body started changing a little faster than you expected, then what comes next may finally help you make sense of those changes in a way that actually feels clear. And here's something many people only begin to notice after living with it for a while. Arthritis doesn't always behave like a steady condition. Some mornings you wake up and your joints feel relatively normal. And other mornings, even simple movement feels noticeably heavier than the day before. That stiffness in the knees, the tightness in the fingers, and that slow, careful effort just to stand up. It doesn't always follow a predictable pattern. And that's exactly what confuses most people. Because if it were only normal aging, you would expect a steady, gradual decline, something consistent and easy to track. But what many seniors actually experience feels different. The discomfort shifts. Some days it's mild, other days it feels sharper, and sometimes it seems influenced by completely ordinary parts of daily life, like sleep quality, activity level, or even what was eaten the day before. And this is where an important question starts to form. If this is only age-related wear and tear, why does the intensity change instead of moving in one steady direction? Because beneath what most people call normal aging, the body is constantly responding to internal signals that aren't always obvious at first glance, especially those connected to how it handles inflammation and daily input from food and lifestyle. And this is where things start to shift. Because once you understand that connection, it becomes easier to see why two simple vegetables are now being discussed in a completely different way. But before that, there's something even more important most people never realize about what quietly increases joint stiffness without giving any clear warning at all. And before we even talk about those two vegetables, there's something most people never fully connect to their joint pain. Because inflammation inside the body doesn't usually appear suddenly. In many cases, it builds quietly, over a long period of time, based on daily habits that feel completely normal. And that's exactly why so many people get confused later. They think to themselves, I haven't changed anything, so why are my joints feeling different now? But here's the part most people don't realize. Some of the biggest triggers are not obvious events. They are small, repeated patterns, happening every single day without drawing attention. Things like processed meals that have become routine, foods that create more internal stress than expected, or eating habits that don't give the body enough time to properly reset. And the most important part is this. You don't feel it happening in real time. The body doesn't send a warning signal immediately. Instead, it changes slowly, almost silently. until one day you notice your knees don't feel as flexible, or your hands feel tighter in the morning, or recovery from simple movement takes longer than it used to. And that's where most people completely miss the connection, because they focus only on the joints. But the real activity is happening underneath, in how the body regulates inflammation over time. And once you see it from that perspective, a new question naturally appears. If everyday habits can slowly influence this process, then is it possible that certain simple foods could help shift that balance in the opposite direction? And this is where things start to become more interesting, because the two vegetables we're about to discuss are not just healthy foods in a general sense. They may actually interact with some of these internal processes in a way most people never expect. But before that becomes clear, you first need to understand what actually happens inside the body when inflammation stays active for too long, and why the joints are often the first place it becomes noticeable. And one of the vegetables that keeps appearing in these conversations may actually surprise you, because it's something many people already have sitting in their kitchen and rarely think much about. Spinach. Now at first, that probably doesn't sound very exciting. But that's exactly what makes it interesting. Because spinach isn't getting attention simply because it's considered healthy. It's because of what naturally exists inside it that researchers and nutrition experts continue studying in relation to inflammation, circulation, and how the body handles stress as it ages. And after 60, that matters far more than most people realize, because the body becomes less efficient at calming long-term irritation and inflammation over time, which is one reason stiffness and discomfort often start lingering longer than they used to. This is where spinach starts becoming more interesting. It naturally contains nutrients linked with antioxidant activity and inflammation support. And when the body feels less overwhelmed internally, many people notice something important. Movement often feels easier, not dramatically overnight, but gradually. Standing up feels less stiff. Morning tightness doesn't feel quite as intense. Even simple movement can start feeling a little smoother again. And surprisingly, spinach may not only be helping through inflammation support alone. Some experts are also interested in how it may support circulation, because when circulation slows down with age, stiffness and recovery can sometimes feel even worse. But here's the part many people never realize. The way spinach is prepared can sometimes reduce some of the very compounds people are trying to get more of. And that becomes important, because the second vegetable we're about to discuss works very differently from spinach altogether. Which is exactly why many people have started paying attention to the combination of both, instead of relying on just one alone. But this is where the story takes a turn most people never expect. Because what if the joints are not actually the only place where the problem is building? What if part of the inflammation connected to stiffness and discomfort is also being influenced by something happening much deeper inside the body, especially in the digestive system? At first, that sounds completely unrelated. But many people over 60 begin noticing certain changes around the same time. Their joint discomfort starts getting worse. Feeling bloated more often. Meals sitting heavier than they used to. Energy dropping suddenly after eating. Or certain foods suddenly making the body feel off for the rest of the day. And most people never connect those experiences together. They assume digestion is one issue, joint stiffness is another, and fatigue is something separate entirely. But this is where things become more interesting, because researchers have been paying increasing attention to the connection between gut health and inflammation throughout the body. And when the digestive system stays irritated or unbalanced for long periods of time, the body can sometimes respond by keeping inflammation signals more active overall. And for many people, the joints are one of the first places where that tension becomes noticeable, which suddenly explains something many seniors quietly experience. Why stiffness sometimes feels worse after certain meals. Why some mornings feel more inflamed than others. And why discomfort can increase even without extra movement or activity. And this is exactly why certain foods rich in fiber, antioxidants, and natural anti-inflammatory compounds have started receiving so much attention recently. Not only for digestion, but for how they may help the body maintain a calmer internal balance overall. And that brings us to the second vegetable. Because unlike spinach, this one has become especially interesting for an entirely different reason. It appears to support the body from another angle altogether, and many seniors already eat it regularly without realizing how powerful it may become when prepared the right way. And once you hear what it is, you may start looking at this ordinary vegetable very differently from now on. The second vegetable is broccoli. And yes, it may sound almost too ordinary to matter. But that's exactly why so many people underestimate it. Because broccoli contains natural compounds that have attracted growing attention for how they may help the body respond to inflammation and stress as it ages. And after 60, that becomes much more important than most people realize. Because inflammation doesn't only affect the joints themselves. It can influence how the entire body feels from day to day. How stiff movement feels in the morning. How quickly the body recovers after activity. Even how heavy or locked up the legs and hips feel after sitting too long. And this is where broccoli starts becoming more interesting. Some people notice that when it becomes part of their routine more consistently, small things begin feeling different. Not dramatic overnight changes, but meaningful improvements in everyday movement. Walking feels smoother. Standing up feels less uncomfortable. The body feels less resistant to movement first thing in the morning. And what makes this even more interesting is that broccoli appears to support the body differently from spinach. Which means the combination may help from multiple directions at once, instead of focusing on only one pathway. And for many people, that overall support is what matters most. Because joint discomfort is rarely caused by just one thing alone. But here's the part many people never realize. The way broccoli is cooked may dramatically affect some of the very compounds people are trying to get more of. In fact, one extremely common cooking habit may quietly reduce much of what makes broccoli so valuable in the first place. And once you understand what that mistake is, you may never prepare your vegetables the same way again. Now this is the part most people rarely hear about. Because eating healthy vegetables is one thing, but preparing them the wrong way may quietly reduce many of the very compounds that make them valuable in the first place. And one of the biggest mistakes is overcooking. Many people grew up boiling vegetables until they became extremely soft. But when vegetables like broccoli are exposed to high heat for too long, some of the natural compounds people are trying to get more of may begin breaking down. So ironically, someone can be eating the right foods while missing much of the reason those foods became important in the first place. And that's not the only issue. Another common mistake is inconsistency. Many people only start eating healthier after a painful flare-up, then slowly drift back into the same habits once the discomfort calms down again. But the body usually responds to repeated daily support, not short bursts of effort. And after 60, that consistency often matters even more because the body doesn't recover the way it once did. Sometimes stiffness that used to disappear in hours can now linger for days. And there's another mistake many people overlook completely. Focusing only on temporary relief, while ignoring the everyday patterns quietly feeding the problem underneath. Because while pain relief may help for the moment, the body may still be dealing with the same internal stress in the background day after day. And over time, those small repeated patterns can shape how movement feels months later. But perhaps the most surprising mistake is this. Many people spend all their energy trying to remove bad foods. while forgetting to consistently add foods that may help the body feel more supported and balanced in the first place. And that's exactly why these two vegetables matter in this conversation. Not because they're miracle cures, but because small daily habits often shape long-term comfort far more than people realize. So now the real question becomes, how can someone over 60 realistically include these foods every day without following some exhausting diet or completely changing their lifestyle? Because the answer is much simpler than most people expect. And the good news is this: supporting your joints naturally does not require strict diets, expensive supplements, or completely changing your life overnight. In many cases, the biggest difference comes from small daily habits that are simple enough to actually maintain. For example, spinach doesn't need to be complicated. Some people simply add a handful into their morning eggs, or mix it into a light soup, or gently sauté it instead of cooking it for too long. Nothing extreme, just small, easy additions that don't feel like a burden. And with broccoli, many people find it easier to include it a few times a week by lightly steaming it or adding it as a side with meals they already eat. The key point here is not perfection. It's repetition, because the body usually responds less to what you do once in a while and more to what you do consistently over time. And something interesting many people begin to notice is this: when simple habits like these become part of a normal routine, other small changes often follow naturally. Getting up in the morning feels a little less stiff. Movement feels slightly less restricted after sitting. Daily activities don't feel as heavy or slow as they once did. Not because anything dramatic changed overnight, but because the body responds gradually when it receives steady support. And alongside food choices, simple daily movement also plays a quiet but important role. Short walks during the day, not sitting for too long without moving, staying gently active in ways that feel realistic, not exhausting. And even something as simple as staying hydrated more consistently can support how the body feels overall. Because one of the biggest misunderstandings about aging is the belief that discomfort automatically means decline is unavoidable. But the body still responds to support after 60. It still responds to movement. It still responds to nourishment. And it still responds to consistency. And sometimes the real goal is not trying to reverse time, but to feel more steady, more mobile, and more confident in everyday life again. To get up with a little less hesitation. To move with a little more ease. To go through the day without constantly thinking about stiffness. And when small choices begin working together like this over time, they can quietly shape how the body feels in ways most people don't expect at the beginning. But there's still one final thing many people need to understand about arthritis and aging. Something that may completely change the way you look at your body from this point forward. And before we finish this, there's something important you really need to understand. Because when people hear the word arthritis, they often start believing it simply means the body is wearing out, as if something inside is slowly breaking and nothing can really change that. But that's not the full picture. What many seniors experience is often a combination of long-term inflammation patterns, daily habits, and how the body responds to what it receives over time. And that means something very important. Your body is still responding to you. Even now, even after 60, even when things feel slower or stiffer than before. It is still reacting to your daily choices, what you eat, how you move, and the consistency of your routine. So the real question becomes, what if some of the discomfort you've been accepting as just aging is actually your body asking for a different kind of support? Not extreme changes, not complicated routines, but small, steady habits repeated over time. Because the truth is, small daily choices don't feel powerful in the moment, but they often become meaningful when you look back later. And if there's one thing to take away from everything we discussed today, it's this: you don't always need something extreme to support your joints. Sometimes it's the simplest foods, the most ordinary habits, and the most consistent routines that your body responds to the most. So if you've been dealing with stiffness, discomfort, or that feeling of not moving the way you used to, try thinking about this differently. Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" maybe the better question is, "What small support has my body been quietly waiting for me to give it?" And sometimes, that answer begins in the simplest moment of your day. Like the next meal you prepare, or the next small choice you make when you decide how to take care of yourself moving forward. And if there's one final image to leave you with, it's this: a body that may feel slower than before, but is still capable of responding, still capable of improving, and still capable of supporting you in ways many people underestimate. Because sometimes, healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about giving your body the consistent support it has been quietly asking for all along.